The CenterPoint receipt screen records activity that increases a cash account or decreases a line of credit account. In this session, we're going to go through the fields on a receipt screen and enter a cash sale. From your Processes menu, select Sales and then Receipts. The screen begins by selecting your company. We can either type in a couple of characters that would find that company, or you can hit your F4 key to bring up a list, or you can click the lookup button of the magnifying glass out at the outside edge of that field. And those are the same rules for any of your lookup lists in your CenterPoint screen. Your receipt is going to be basically a combination of the different setup lookup lists that you have created previously. So here we're going to select our company. And once you select an item in a list, you can right click and there's always a menu for different helps. And in this case, you could create a new item. You could edit this particular company if you needed to change something like the address. Or in the company or the bank account field, set as default is a popular one to use. If you're commonly using the same company when you're doing receipts, then selecting that particular company and clicking set as default would always fill in that field the next time you open up the screen so that you don't have to do that again. And the same way with the bank account that we'll get to. The tab key moves field to field, and it went to my current batch. The current batch defaults to no batch, meaning that when this transaction is saved, it's just going to post it at the same time. If there were any printing options like printing a receipt, it would also do that printing. If you don't want it to post at this time because perhaps you're putting in some transactions and you don't have all of the detail and you want to come back to it later, then you could put it in a batch. And at the batch field, you can right click and create a new batch. And then by selecting that batch name, all transactions that go into that batch are just going to be saved in the batch, but they won't post until you go to Processes and Batch Transactions and post that batch. We're going to leave this at no batch. And then we get to our bank account field. So this time I'm going to type in a couple of letters to find my bank account, and it found First National Bank. The bank deposit field is optional. That's used if you are making deposit slips and you want a deposit number assigned to your different receipt screens. The advantage of using a deposit number on your different receipts is when you are doing your bank reconciliation, on your bank statement, you're going to see a total amount of a particular deposit that you did that day at the bank. And if you do the bank deposit, then that will show you the total amount of that deposit rather than the individual receipts that you would have to add up and reconcile to the amount that you see on the bank statement. What I generally recommend is to leave the bank deposit field empty when you're doing the receipt, and then when you're ready to go to the bank, you can go over to Processes, Banking, and do your bank deposit, where you will be able to see all the receipts that you did at that time. But you can also do a right click here and add a new bank deposit, and then just simply select that bank deposit on each receipt that you're planning on depositing that particular day. On the receipt from, we're going to select the customer that we got this cash from. So we're going to select, this time we're going to do a sale, and we're going to select our elevator. So I typed in ELE. That did a filter of all of the items that it saw with those character string within the name. And that is coming from an option. So you can see that these particular items don't begin with ELE, it's contained in here. So I'm going to select Red Wing Elevator, but if we right click in that field, there are some additional right click menu options at the name field. First of all, there's one called Review Transactions. So if I wanted to see all the transactions to this particular name, Maybe to make sure that I haven't already entered the receipt, I can click Review Transactions. That brings up a search screen, and I'm seeing all of the transactions I've done to Red Wing Elevator in the date span that's selected up at the top. And of course, I could change that date selection and look at a narrower or wider date selection if I wanted to. And I could edit those too. The other thing you can do on your right-click menu is set a behavior for this particular customer. So on the transaction actions, leave transaction empty means that all of the information at the bottom of the grid for entering the account and details would remain blank. If I wanted it to automatically recall the last transaction, I could select that option. Or if I had a reoccurring transaction set for this particular name, then load default recurring would automatically fill in my grid with that reoccurring transaction. The show all items is going to toggle between showing all my items or showing only active items. And then the contains is where I have an option to either choose contains. So when I do my lookup, it would look at everything that all the names that contain that particular character string that I entered, or I could do a begins with. So it toggles between begins with or contains. And then I have my options. In my options, I'm also indicating which columns that I want that lookup to be looking in. So right now I have it marked that I want it to look in my abbreviation and my last name, first name. I could change this to any of the pieces I wanted to, or put them in order. So if I wanted it to first look in last name instead of abbreviation first, I could put that one first. And on the right, it represents what I'm seeing in my field, what it's returning in that text column. So if I wanted it to return by abbreviation, I could do that. In my case, I have it selected to do last name, first name. So those are some different options. And if you change your options, you can check this box to save it at the preference, and the reset to defaults will return to what the default is of the installation. I'm going to click OK, and that took out my name, but I'll go ahead and put that back in again. Red Wing Elevator. All right, and now we can tab. When I selected my name, it also filled in my address information. If I wanted this to go to a different address and I'm printing a receipt or something, I could change if there were a different address for this particular name. I'm going to tab to my next field. If I had any open invoices, customer invoices for this name, apply to open invoices would be highlighted in yellow, and the balance would be here. And if I wanted to pay from those open invoices, I would click that button and select what I want to pay off of the open invoices. I'm going to tab now and over to my receipt invoice number. This is incrementing by a particular sequence that I have set. And in this case, the sequence is set to do the date. So it is putting in the 12/12/18 with some zeros out here. So my next one on today would be 12/12/18/01, and it would keep incrementing. And that is done by your numbering sequences under Setup, General, and Numbering Sequences. My date is defaulting today's date, or the last day of the last period that you have opened up in the CenterPoint database, whichever comes first. And I can change my date if this was not today, but it was the same month, but a different day. I could just type in a day and it goes to the same month and year. If I wanted this to a different month and year, then I can type in the month and the day. It would go to the same year. And of course, if I needed a different year, I would have to do in the year amount too, or I could click my calendar and select from my calendar date also. We're going to do 12/15. Okay, and in the amount, you can either leave it blank, and then when you're finished with all of the items that you enter in the bottom grid, you can click Adjust Amount at the end and it would total it up at the top. Or if you know what amount that you're supposed to end up with, then you can type in that amount. And if you type in an amount, it will default to the first line on your grid. And then as you enter different amounts, it keeps trying to add up to the amount that you started with so that you are entering the transaction with the expected amount of the revenue. On the payment type, these different options, or you can add different payment types. And this is just going to help you if you're doing your bank deposit. You can sort out which ones were checks and cash and so forth for doing that deposit. So we're going to do a check there, and then you can enter in the check reference number if you wanted to record that. And then we get to our account. In the account, we're going to enter what this particular revenue represents in our chart of accounts. So in this case, well, first of all, you could do your lookup on your accounts if you wanted to find it that way. Or I know that this is a sale that we're doing, so I'm going to type in sale. I've filtered for all my different sales, and then I can go ahead and select which sales that I'm recording this time. Once I do that, it fills out my grid with this amount and the unit of measure that was coming from that particular account. If I want to add different columns on the front screen, this is customizable for you. Right-click on the blue row and choose Add Remove Columns. And then I have all my different columns that are available. And if I wanted to add other columns that I want to see on the screen, I simply need to check the box. For example, if I wanted to see Profit Center on my front screen, I can check that, click my striped up arrow to gather it to the top, and then I can move it where I want in the lineup. So if I want things I use more frequently, I would put them further to the top. And then it lists my changes, and it will remember whatever you did the next time you come into your receipt screen. I can always click the Detail button. The Detail button is going to show all of the fields that are available in the particular template that I'm using, and I can change the template here if I need to, which in this case I am going to. This is defaulting to DT increased revenue, but in this particular case with my sale of corn, I want to take it out of inventory. I'm selling stored corn. So I am going to change this template to DT sell raised inventory. When I choose that template, it changes my grid to the template. And now it's asking me for the inventory that I want to take this out of, which is going to be my inventory corn. And I need to put in how many bushels I want to sell. So we're going to sell, let's say, 3,000 bushels. There's no quantity 2. The other thing I can do on this detail screen on the inventory is look up what I actually have in that inventory for balances. So I'm going to click this little button with the 3 dots. It gives me the balances that are holding in that inventory broken down by my different years and my inventory locations, because I am storing my inventory, my raised crop inventory, with balance details of production year and inventory location. So here I can see what I have in all these different locations, and I can see that at my elevator I still have 40,000 plus bushels left there, and I am selling it from the inventory. So I'm going to close this, and you'll notice over at the right now, my inventory price says only 1 penny. That's because it hasn't found the right balance yet. I'm going to go ahead and tab over. I don't know the production center detail because I'm storing this at the elevator, and it came from multiple crop production center details. So I no longer know that information. I do know that it's corn. I do know that it's 2018. I don't know the production center, but the inventory location I do know. It is the elevator. When I choose the elevator, now it updated my inventory price because now there was a match on my 2018 elevator location and found what the price was that I had originally valued it at when I put it through new production. And it gives me my sale price of the $333. So actually I'm losing a little bit of money here on this particular example. And we're going to click OK. We could put a notation, but I'm going to click OK. When I have that information filled in, you can always click the plus sign at the left of your grid row here, and that will show you all the different when I post this transaction. So my bank account is going to increase $10,000. My change in raised crop, which was the offset to my inventory of inventory corn, is going to be debited for $10,500, decrease. That's a revenue account that increased when I put the new production in. Now I'm taking the inventory out, so we're decreasing that again, but the revenue for sales of corn is increasing by $10,000. That's the offset to the cash. And then my inventory is also decreasing by $10,500. So these four things are happening just from the details that I selected on this particular screen. If I had selected just the DT increase revenue and not done it selling from the field, then I would just have two journals here of the bank and the sale of corn. Then this particular entry, I'm going to collapse that row again here. Just click that. Okay, let's say that on this entry we also had some storage costs at the elevator, and I want to record that too. So I'm going to pick my storage cost account right there, and I don't need a quantity in this case, and they charge me, let's say, 3 cents a bushel. So I'm going to put in $90. All right, because I had 3,000 bushels at 3 cents, so they charged me $90. So that was a positive cost, and it actually decreased my gross sale. So now I have an amount of $9,910, and that should agree with the check that I received. And I can also put in my corn profit center here, and we can just give it a notation if we want to. And that is all there is to this transaction. Then down at the bottom of the screen are our different icons for printing and scanning. We are not printing a receipt. If we were going to print a receipt, this would have a green check mark on it to print. And we could change that here. We could print the invoice if we wanted to. And if we did that, then it has a green check mark. If we had a document that we wanted to scan to this, like perhaps we wanted to scan the invoice we got from the elevator, then we could check that and scan this document. Or I'm sorry, that's the email one if we were going to email. And we're not emailing anything. This one is the scan if we were going to scan. And the paperclip if we wanted to attach the document, but we had already scanned it, or have a document out there that we wanted to attach to this transaction, we could click that and use the attach to browse to that file and attach it. And there are other videos for using your scanning and attaching documents. And then down at the bottom of the screen are our memos. If we wanted a particular memo on here, we could put that on that, and if it were printing a receipt, it would actually print that on the receipt also. And down at the bottom, adjust amount is if your amount is different than up at the top, you can click adjust amount, and that will update the amount at the top. The buttons down at the bottom, save is going to post this transaction. And in this case, we don't have a batch, so it's going to save it and post it. If we had a batch, it would just simply be saving it to the batch. Clear will clear all of the details that we have in here, including the name, but it would remain at the same company in the bank account, and we could start over. Recall is if we're using the have a name that we want to bring back the last transaction and have it fill in. Then you can make any changes and then go ahead and save that transaction. Every time you click recall, it goes back one more transaction until you get the one that you're looking for. Reoccurring is if you have a reoccurring transaction set up for a particular name. Let's go ahead and I'll show you this. If we do a clear, and if I pick Sam Myers, the yellow button on the reoccurring lit up, meaning that there is a reoccurring assigned to this in my transaction with this rental income because it's a monthly rent. And this particular reoccurring has been set up with a fixed amount of 410. You can also have a reoccurring of percent where then it would fill in amount of 0, but whatever you fill in at the top amount would become the amount for that transaction. And it is just a shortcut, so that all I would have to do right now is click adjust amount and I would be ready to save it. And then we have other options down at the bottom. You can review transactions, which brings up the last 10 transactions that you've done with this particular company and bank account. Custom fields is if you're using custom fields like this and you want to fill out something for your custom fields for this particular transaction. Recall by company will toggle between recall by company or recall by company bank account combination. So if you're using recall and you only wanted to pull things that are that particular company and bank account specific, then you would want recall by company bank account. And then we can set tab stops. So if there are some fields that you typically don't use at all, and when you're tabbing through, you just want to skip over them, then you can uncheck some fields here, such as maybe you wanted to skip over the bank deposit, which is here it is. It's just called deposit in this case. And then that would stop from going through that particular field. And we'll do one other one. How about the receipt invoice number? And I'll show you what that looks like. So if we were up here at the top and press our tab key, it went right to receive from. It skipped the bank deposit. And then over here, it skipped receipt invoice. So it's just a shortcut of eliminating some of those tab stops to go through the entry screen a little quicker. And then there is a refresh. So if you made some changes on here and you just wanted everything to refresh, that would refresh the screen. And once you have all these fields filled in as you want them, you are ready to click Save, and that completes doing a receipt in CenterPoint.